Hello, and welcome to episode 74 of Bodied, the Cloud9 Fancast. Tonight, we shall discuss the big plays and big throws of the previous week. I'm your host, Havokpus, and today I'm joined by...
The doctor is back in the house, Dr. Manhatten joining the podcast once again.
Frozencreek, aka not Tide Pod or CS1, but their legendary matches with Captain Flowers live in my memory.
Well, thanks for joining, everyone. Glad to see some nice, friendly faces here as we jump in to the results. So I'm going to start with PUBG. They participated in the StarSeries PUBG event, and it was actually pretty fun. I think it was just as good as IEM Katowice, maybe a bit more. The competition was really exciting. There were a lot of really cool teams there. And it was actually a pretty marathon event. It was spread over 4 days. 5 games were played each day for a total of 20 games. And that's a lot. And Cloud9 had some sporadic results. Sometimes it would be, at the top. Sometimes they'd be at the middle. Sometimes they'd be at the bottom. But they did get a couple of chicken dinners that allowed them to push themselves up high in the standings and finish 4th. Which I think is pretty good, because I think they also finished 3rd at IEM Katowice. So, doing pretty good at these international LAN events, getting like top 3, top 4, that's a pretty good sign for your PUBG team, I think.
Yeah, I think we've been starting to see the consistency that we've been hoping for with this team. And the performance at the IEM event, assuming that it wasn't paused the whole time, has some things that we were definitely looking for. So I'm glad that the results are starting to appear there.
Yeah, and I think with time, hopefully, they'll get even more cohesive. I think what was interesting is that some teams would just be really streaky, and Team Liquid would dominate for a little while, but then they would kind of struggle. I know FaZe, I think for the first couple of days or something, was looking pretty hot, and then they just nosedived, and they didn't do well at all. So it was actually really interesting. Another interesting thing was that the Asian teams from China and Korea were struggling as well, and I think it's because that the tournament was played mostly on first-person perspective, and the Asian servers are all on third-person perspective, and so they also did a warm-up before each day, I think, and they would do a third-person perspective, just a fun match to kind of get warmed up. And I'm not sure if the Asian teams did any better or not, but it seems that they kind of struggled in this event, maybe because of the game mode, maybe also because, that region isn't super keen on FPS. I'm not sure exactly the reason, but it was just kind of an interesting tidbit that I kind of caught. But is there anything else that we want to mention? I know it's there's not a lot to really talk about, but at least for me, it was a pretty fun event that I could kind of catch and kind of have running in the background and kind of glance at every once in a while. All right, well, let's move on to CSGO, because they had an interesting ride. So last week, Dr. Manhatten and I were talking about their performance at IEM Katowice, and where we left off, Cloud9 had to go up against SK Gaming in their final group stage match to get into the playoff bracket. And it was actually super exciting. It went to a full 3 games, and on Inferno, or as Throwferno as I now refer it to, they defeated SK Gaming after being down 4-11. I mean, to be at 4-11 and then just completely go over the top and beat them is pretty insane. And then when they got to quarterfinals, they, I guess, of course, had to go up against FaZe Clan. And it was kind of a repeat of the Boston Major. I think that there was some really interesting things that happened on Inferno specifically, and it was mostly that Cloud9 had the advantage, but due to a mix of a really controversial referee ruling, as well as Cloud9 really struggling on CT side in overtime, it went to double overtime, and sadly Cloud9 wasn't able to really close out, and they lost. But it was a super exciting and close game that, I was a little bummed that they lost, but it was a really good match, and I guess like a quality loss, quote unquote. But yeah, it was a really interesting time, but I thought it was a super interesting performance to say the least.
Yeah, and especially because we left it off at right before them beating us, going into playing SK, and it was just the fact that you and I both said like I'm not optimistic like at all, especially considering the performances against Renegades and against Team Liquid and Tyloo earlier at IEM Katowice, but they managed to beat SK, and there's something about that T side in Inferno that's just ridiculous because it was just legitimately in overtime what it was like 6 like just straight rounds won by T side, like where we won 3 and then FaZe would win like another 3 and force him to double overtime again, and then like FaZe got T side to my knowledge, and they would just win it again. So maybe it's something to do with that map, and yeah, the fact that so many teams like throw on that, it's crazy. But I think it was a moral victory at the end because, like you and I said, they started off looking completely terrible, beating like just barely eking out wins against Tyloo, and again losing to Team Liquid like very convincingly and throwing leads that they shouldn't have. But I think that whatever was in the Boston Major is still left in this team, and hopefully they'll for the next whatever the next tournament is right now. And actually, I think they were playing this earlier today against in ESL Pro League.
Yes, you are correct.
But yeah, I'm hoping whatever is left from the major, it's still rubbing on us, and it's just showing that it wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, I can agree with that on all fronts. I think if you were to play that Inferno map 100 times, that FaZe would win that the majority of the time. But I think that watching this matchup again, I didn't get to see the first 2 games. I did get to see the end of game 3, and there's just something about Cloud9, FaZe, and Inferno that is incredibly fucking hype. Because the major matchup on Inferno was one of the best esports moments that I've ever seen. And if Cloud9 would have pulled this out, this would have been, again, one of the top esports moments that I've ever seen. Seeing who was it, Skadoodle go off in the first overtime.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
I think he was doing
absolutely
some
bonkers.
insane plays.
Yeah, that shit was absolutely bonkers. So, I mean, when it comes down to double overtime, like someone has to win at some point. Like it sucks to lose, but I don't think you can really pull too much from it at that point, just because it's so close. So I'm not too upset with our result. Like, oh, we lost to one of the top teams in the world, and on paper, one of the top teams of all time. So like, it sucks, but it's one of those losses where like you can write it off and kind of learn from it, as opposed to like being pissed off about it. Like, oh, we didn't lose to Mouse Esports or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think positive takeaways. This helps the FaZe Clan C9 rivalry. I think this rivalry is becoming a really good one, just in esports in general. It's something really great to see that you have like these 2 really great teams in there. Now, like when they meet, it's like a clash of titans. And I also think that it's good. What was my other point? Oh yeah, I think it's good that we still retain the 3rd place spot in the world. So top 3 still good. You're always going to be really difficult when you go against someone like FaZe Clan, but it was a great match, and I think that everyone can just be happy with that. Also, just a quick discussion point I want to take up with. So earlier tonight, Cloud9 played against Optic, and they went 1-1, going 16-8 on Train and 4-16 on Mirage. Now, what I'm sort of wondering is, does the team need a break? Because it seems that they're getting kind of worn out from the constant touring in matches. They go from the major, then they go, oh, we have to do this other thing. Oh, we have to go all the way across the ocean and do one tournament. Then we have to do another and go to like IEM Katowice, and then we have to fly back. Oh, in like 2 days we have to go to China to do the WESG thing. It just seems that they're constantly on the road and they're just constantly playing matches and having to like do all this stuff. And it seems like I think the team would be better and get back to that major form if you just maybe gave them like a month or so, to just like decompress and just settle down and not have to worry about things for a little while, because it seems like they're really running themselves ragged with all the heavy tournaments.
I'm not sure I can agree with the super long break. I do think that at some point in time they do need some kind of short break, just kind of to recharge their batteries and just sleep a little bit when they don't need to and just fuck around and play other games. Yeah, they have been going on and on for quite a while, but I do think that they are professionals, and they do seem to have a professional personality behind the scenes. So I do think that there is room to give them a break, but I don't think a long break is the best kind of thing, because what we do have going on right now is mostly pretty good. They just need to clean up the edges, especially against the bad teams. Like, we need to figure out a way to not drop games against the bad teams, and it could be kind of like a mental relapse, which could be fixed by some kind of break and spending more time in practice. But I'm not sure if a huge super long break is going to help. I do think that there should be some time that they could take off a couple weeks and just nail down their practice schedule. But until there's a really big tournament coming up, I'm not sure if that's the best idea at the moment.
Yeah, I was mainly just proposing it because it does seem extremely exhausting and probably wearing on anyone's nerves that you're just like constantly having to do stuff. So I definitely think that at least a small break would definitely help them. We'll have to see. I mainly just want to make sure that they're able to keep their drive and not get so burnt out. Because I remember last week Stu was talking about like, oh yeah, after the major we just felt really burnt out and there wasn't as much focus and there wasn't as much drive to really do stuff. So I'm mainly just wanting to make sure that the team, still has that fire within them, because when we saw them at the major, when they have this fire in them, when they're playing everyone, when everyone's like in sync and they're playing on, they can do some really great things. So I just want to, I guess, like ensure that.
Yeah, I can get behind that. And this is just like a kind of left field opinion, but just like maybe it has something to do with like, I think I was listening to a podcast and like what I like to call like winner syndrome, in which like the major is pretty much the biggest thing you can achieve in like CSGO. So like right when you achieve that, it's just the fact that like you just kind of realize like, okay, where do we kind of go from here? And I feel like Skadoodle was like, it makes sense that Skadoodle would say that, because he's been playing for God knows how long. You got guys like Stewie who haven't been playing that long, to my knowledge. Not sure about Automatic Rush or Tarek, but it would make sense for someone like Skadoodle, and I do want to I do want to see that there's still a fire under them, because this team, despite winning the major and winning the best thing you could achieve, especially for a North American team that has yet to achieve that, I still want to see just like how far this team could go. We've seen them, win it, but that's what I want to see, is like how long this can go. Like that's just my kind of suspicion if they are feeling kind of burnt out.
Yeah, I think that is a good point, because this isn't a team, perhaps like FaZe, where like they're built to win majors. Like, this is like a team that is built to like kind of compete at the top level, but not exactly win majors. And kind of winning a major was more of a fluke than it was like an expectation from the squad. So like at that point, it becomes like we've literally reached as far as we can go. Like now what? And maybe they just need a break of maybe I guess. And now that you mentioned that, and it's got my brain going, like maybe a month-long break to just kind of just chill and realize like, hey, like we can do this again. Like, oh we've did this shit once out of left field. Why can't we do this again? And I can see an argument for both, but I do think that at some point they kind of need to realize that just because they've won a major doesn't mean that they've like achieved their lifelong goals. Like just because Tiger Woods won his first major, this is a really stretch for you young folks. But back in my day when I was your age, Tiger Woods was winning major after major, and it is like a mentality thing. And a lot of people would win one major and just drop off the map in golf, kind of. And it does take a special personality and drive to win more than one, and especially win more than one each year. And I'm not sure that there's anyone in the CSGO scene or right now who is built to win major after major again. So I think that if they can just spend some time refocusing, whether that's an extra week of practice here or there, or even taking a prolonged break, like they have an opportunity here to win more than one major.
Yeah. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, they did win a major, and that's something that no one can ever take away from them. You know, they could never really perform in a major again, but you'll have to say, yes, they did win the Boston Major in 2018, and yes, it was probably one of the most memorable moments of a lot of people's lives. So at the end of the day, they at least won the major, and we will continue to support them no matter what. But moving on, we got some spicy Overwatch news for you guys. The London Spitfire soared to victory with a 2-0 week. The team crushed the Florida Mayhem 3-1 and then swept a surging Philadelphia Fusion 4-0, and it looked super duper strong. This week they will be facing off against the Boston Uprising and the LA Gladiators. And all the while this is happening, some breaking news. The head coach of the London Spitfire, Bishop, was released from the team supposedly at the request of the players. A new coaching structure will be revealed soon, but until then, I would assume we will mainly be held in check by Jayfiel and Changyun. So how does everyone feel about all of this news?
All right. First off, I'm gonna say it's completely fucking wild that the players can drive out a coach. Like this isn't something that you see often in any kind of professional sport. Like, say what you want about the man, it's just wild that the team can band together and get their coach fired. Like, there's some point where the coach has to have the final say in what happens, and then the players have to just listen to him because he's the one who's the coach. He's the guy who is recruited and paid to be the leader of this team. But it is kind of worrying what happened behind the scenes to get to this point where they just completely lost faith in their lead, or like,
well,
yeah.
Well, what an interesting thing to happen, Frozen. Sorry to cut you off, but also Bishop was the coach for Cloud9's NA squad back in the day, and there was also internal issues surrounding him when he was the coach of our old team. So it seems that there is a repeating pattern of him causing friction within the team. And I think part of the friction in the London Spitfire was that it was Bishop who decided, okay, we're going to get rid of Fisher, we're going to get rid of Rascal, and no one on the team wanted that. No one on the team asked for that. I think Rascal and Fisher was even on record saying that, like, yeah, I was really surprised that I got traded. And it seems that it was his idea. No one wanted that. There may be other struggling issues. Maybe that's why London Spitfire was struggling on control, because against Philly and Florida this week, they looked actually pretty good on control. So maybe Bishop out of the way, and this is now just official, and that we're seeing maybe a different Spitfire now that he's not interfering as much. We don't know because we don't have a lot of access to a lot of the internals, but I find it interesting that this just happened all of a sudden. And I think it feels also kind of sudden and kind of scary, since Bishop has been pretty associated with Cloud9 for a while, as well as, he's like the head coach, or at least head coach in quotation marks, since some of the players even just referred to him as like an assistant coach. So maybe he really just wasn't doing that much and not pulling his weight enough. Who really knows? I can't say, but I find it that it's a very interesting piece of news.
Oh yeah, I think it's wild how fast it happened. Also, like, I don't think I remember hearing any talk about people being upset with him. Like, I know he's been, maybe controversial is a bit too strong of a word, but he's underperformed on teams before, like the early Cloud9 renditions with Fissure and such. They didn't perform quite as well as they probably should have, but I'm not entirely sure we could call this squad underperforming either. Like, I don't think that we were performing to our peak, but he was also, I felt like he was doing a decent job managing the personalities on the squad, because this was a team of two top Korean teams in Overwatch, and he was managing them into one squad. And I do understand trading off Fissure and such. Like, that might not have been just him. Like that might have been an order from Jack. Like, because these
because they're like expensive.
Probably, yeah. Like, this is high paid talent. Like, these aren't like scrubs. Like, we don't have Golden Glue just sitting on our bench all the time. Or Zay. So, like, these are like this would I feel like it would be more comparable to maybe if we had Licorice as just a backup top lane getting paid, like a starting top lane, or just sitting on our bench, and then we never played him. Maybe I feel like he's more of a stronger factor than Licorice is for Fissure and stuff. But like, I would be more interested in what Fissure would have to say about it, because nobody wants to ride the bench all the time. Like, so I don't blame him about that. I would be more interested to see how the team's performance is attributed to a Bishop's coaching and what they want to do to solve the problem, because this is a team that is easily capable of winning Overwatch League this year, and I do think they've underperformed to a certain extent. I think that's fair to say, but I don't think that they've been wildly inefficient at any point in time.
Yeah, I think it'll be definitely interesting to track their progress as the season, not just the stage, but as the season as a whole progresses. There's also rumors of new player signings and a bunch of other stuff. So, as this story kind of develops for the London Spitfire, I think it'll be very interesting to track. Also,
all right. Sorry.
I was just going to real quick plug that the British Hurricanes, the London Spitfire's Overwatch EU Contenders team, this is the Overwatch roster that will feature an all-European roster. They will be playing their first match on March 11th, so that's this Sunday. So, feel free to tune into that. Make sure you cheer them on. It will be their first match against Singularity, I believe. So, just make sure mark that on your calendar real quick. Set a reminder in your phone, and so you can watch the match. But go ahead with what you're saying.
One last thing. I have been incredibly impressed with the Spitfires meme this week. They went so deep with a Cloud9 Jack meme. They said that Jack was a wheeler and dealer and had him in a van of all places. And this is like a throwback meme to maybe like 2011, maybe when Harry Redknapp at the time was the manager of I believe the Tottenham Hotspur. Maybe it was Queens Park Rangers at the time, but a journalist asked him like driving away from training if he was like a wheeler and dealer or something like that, and he's like, oh, I don't know, fuck a wheeler dealer or some shit, but like in the soccer world, this was a huge fucking meme for a decent amount of time. I'm talking like 5 years. Like people joked about it, and people would still bring it up today. And it was incredible that Jack and the Spitfire team went about that meme this past week. I don't think it was anything I would ever see at any point in time. And the actual van video is hard to find, but if you just type in Harry Redknapp, that's REDKNAPP, I believe, wheeler dealer, you'll get a video of him talking to a journalist. I think it's in front of a Sky Sports banner and shit, talking about how he's not a fucking wheeler and dealer. I just thought that was the funniest shit I've seen in quite a long time, just because it was a meme that isn't related to esports at all, and it's pretty much a dead meme, but it was a really good turn up. So shout out to Cloud9 for pulling that out of their ass.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dr. Manhatten, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any quick opinions on the Overwatch news before we move on to League of Legends?
You guys kind of summed it up for the most part. It did take me out of caught me off guard for the most part. Hopefully it wasn't anything, as Frozen said, just too political, because it sucks that I've heard in esports sometimes like people can get fired over that. Actually, I heard rumors of like that's the reason why the LPL is such a weird place to play in. I've heard rumors of actually even confirmed reports. There's like teams that like won't sign you in the LPL because like just their star player didn't like you or just didn't want to play with you. So I'm just hoping that it was a mutual agreement, but that's just me being an optimist.
Yeah, and it might have seemed that way. Who knows for sure? We don't have access to a lot of the internals. But anyway, check out the dogfight. Me, myself, and I go over the London Spitfire results in a bit more detail and talk about a bit about the roster signing rumors as well as the upcoming matches that are going to be happening later this weekend. So check that out if you can. Certainly check it out next week. I'll probably be talking more in depth about Bishop leaving and all that good stuff. So check that out. Anyway, moving on to League of Legends. The Cloud9 Academy team went 1-1. They defeated Golden Guardians with a Scion mid of all things. I did not expect this. And they lost to CLG Academy. I can't remember much from the CLG Academy game, and I unfortunately didn't watch the Golden Guardians Academy game, but it seems that the Academy team's just doing their normal shenanigans of doing well one game and then kind of struggling the next. I'm not sure if that's the nature of it, just being Academy, and they are playing with some inexperienced players like Shiro and Wiggly who are talented but maybe don't have as much experience to really play consistently or what, but it seems they kind of struggle sometimes, and it's, I don't know, just annoying, I guess.
Yeah, I will say that a pick is really good, like Scion mid, when you even have the LCK actually imitating it. Earlier this morning, Kongdu Monster in their match against the Degenerate Green Wings in the LCK tried to do a Scion mid, but they realized the flaw of, oh, wait, we just sacrificed a damage dealer, so we can't win this series, and now we have to just lose. But yeah, it's just I thought the Sion mid pick was just amazing.
It sounds amazing and hilarious. I bet the casters went nuts over it. Or, well, no, that game wasn't casted actually, so we'll never know if they went nuts over it.
Yeah, so the reason that Sion has become so big is because there was a bug on his E, his shooty thingy, where it made the hitbox wider than it should have been. So he's just been super broken through 8.3. So that game, right, would have been played on 8.3? Or no, sorry, it was played on, or no, sorry, it was broken on 8.4. Is that correct?
I don't even know anymore.
It would make sense considering. I was gonna say it would make sense considering that we've seen like Uber tanks are now part of the meta thanks to like this whole banner shenanigans. So it would make sense that he's even more busted than what he is now, thanks to again Uber tanks being the thing.
Or like the thing was that his E hitbox was broken, so he could poke a lot easier than he should have been able to. Plus, due to his W passive, he gets a lot more health or he gets a ton of health. So he was basically like a Galio with a little less damage, but like 8 times the tankiness, because he could survive lane just as well, but probably do more damage than a Galio could early game. So Jensen was actually playing it on stream and doing not on stream, but on other people's streams and doing pretty well with it. So it was something that people have been trying. It's not appear too much, just because then you lose like a damaged dealer. But it is cool to actually see it in action. So that's kind of like the reasoning behind it. 8.5 came out this week, and they fixed that bug. So in next week, we will not probably see Sion as much. Maybe just top lane, just because he's still a pretty strong pick, but not because he's just a flat out broken.
Yeah. And speaking of Uber tanks and such, Cloud9, the main LCS team, I think, at least in my opinion, had a bad week. They played against CLG and had the throw of all throws, probably. And they played against Golden Guardians and just had a mistake-riddled game, and one, I think, mainly just because Golden Guardians wasn't that skilled of a team. And this week really bothered me because, you know, I wasn't bugged about the drafts in either of the games. I think the drafts were good. I think it was just the team is just playing weird and playing scattered, and it happens every season now, every split it seems. You know, Cloud9 does well, and then as it starts to get down into the end of the weeks, Cloud9 starts to do weird stuff. They start to just make dumb decisions. They start to lose, and not lose in a good way, but like lose bad. You know, they threw a 10k gold lead against CLG. You should have closed out by then, bud. What are you doing? You know, against Golden Guardians, I think it was just so many mistakes were made, and Cloud9 was just better at capitalizing on the mistakes that Contracts and Golden Guardians made. And it just really frustrated me.
It's easy, yeah. It's somewhat easy to look at this on paper and say like, oh, we lost to CLG, and you know we weren't doing really well against Golden Guardians. However, me being just the natural, or at least try to like find the positive in most of this stuff, and even I say that while I kind of agree with you guys that it was a frustrating week. First of all, let's be fair, CLG did have a great week. Like they beat TL for God's sake. So I mean, whatever CLG was drinking that morning, I mean, they probably ate their Wheaties that morning because they played phenomenally that weekend as well. So I will give credit there. In terms of C9's drafting, for the CLG game, it was questionable because again, I'm just beyond frustrated at the lack of Tristana. I've said this multiple times in this podcast before. This is probably like the third, fourth episode this year where I'm frustrated in the Tristana priority. Maybe with the Leona pocket pick, they were just planning on just locking in a bot lane that could just legit lock Stixxay and Bifrost out of just playing the bot lane. However, Varus compared to someone like Justana doesn't really have as good of a sieging potential, and unless he lands at all in team fights, he's not excellent. Like, you can do some damage, but he's not excellent. What I do want to question is the Kha'Zix priority, because the thing about Kha'Zix, and when we saw this, Svenskeren was just doing the best thing he could do, and that's just try to find picks in the late game. But unfortunately, he would get capitalized on, which, you're playing against Zach, like Cho'Gath and Rakan, who have tons of disruption with the Kha'Zix. So if you're not finding picks like super cleanly in the late game as Kha'Zix, post 30 minutes, you're just not doing anything. So right after they lost the first fight, like right after they got the first Baron, I literally told my friend, like, yeah, this game's, if it's gonna be one, it's gonna be one on the back of Jensen, because Licorice was just not doing terribly much in the team fights. Smoothie was getting picked off pretty early as well, and legitimately the only scaling they had that was pretty decent was Rise. Golden Guardians, there was a few mistakes. However, I do want to emphasize the fact that if there was a week we had to just not look good, it's probably this week, because even though it's a loss in our record and it hurts us in terms of the standings, it doesn't hurt us too much, because if you look at our record right now, we're still the only teams that are in contention with us right now. Well, Clutch Gaming, I wouldn't be too concerned right now because we have the 2-0 above them. So worst case scenario with them, like if we can keep some sort of steady and consistent positive momentum going forward, we can easily beat the tiebreaker and get a bye week. 100 Thieves were 1-1s and we're 2 wins above them, so that's pretty good. The only team that's really of any concern right now is probably Team Liquid, and they're still in the same boat as 100 Thieves. So if there was a week where C9 had to drop the ball, I say that and saying, like, I don't want them to drop the ball. If there was a week where C9 had to somewhat drop the ball, it was this week. I wanted them to experiment, and almost all the analysts, like in the past 2 weeks, said they want C9 to experiment more. So in a sense, I can get around some of the picks this weekend.
Since you mentioned Licorice, I think we should talk about this a little bit, since he is our rookie top laner. What did you two think about Licorice on tanks? He seemed, at least from my opinion, he seemed to do well in lane, but I think that, and I tweeted this out a bit on the Bodied Twitter as one of my Bodied Twitter rants, but he does well in lane, but I think he somewhat struggles because with the bruisers and carries, he's able to really be impactful. Sven can go up there, get a gank early. He has this really impactful lead, and then he transfers that really well to the other members of the team. But on a tank, he can't really do that. So he can stay in lane and he can kind of do well, but he can't get as much of an impactful lead and then transfer that on to other players on the team. So I think he kind of struggles with that. And I think maybe also with coordination, since tanks operate a bit differently from carries in these sort of skirmishy bruiser champions. But I'm not sure as much to say. We've only seen him 2 games, one on Cho and one on Maokai. So what do you think, Frozen?
Yeah, I think throughout the split that, or not, throughout the season that we're not going to be able to put Licorice into a winning matchup each game, because that's just putting a band-aid over any of the problems that we have as a team. And I think he performed for the most part just fine this week. He played both parts of the Maokai and Cho'Gath a matchup, and when he was on Maokai into Cho'Gath, he played it just fine. He stayed mostly even against Darshan, and then when he went against Lorlo as Cho'Gath into Maokai, he completely stomped that lane, showing that Cho'Gath is probably a better pick than Maokai in lane. So I think he did okay. I think that he wasn't the only problem, and I think that it was more of how we, organize our team fights in the late game more than how he performed overall. And I do think that his target selection when it came to the roots on Maokai became a little bit questionable as the minutes rolled on. I think that it was more of a team problem than it was a Licorice problem on tanks.
I think I can agree with that. What about you, Dr. Manhattan?
I tweeted this slightly, but yeah, he does need work in terms of laning. It's fine still on tanks. The only thing that he really needs to work on is just team fighting and help coordinate, team fights as well. And I think that yes, it is indicative of a team problem if that's the case. However, and I also tweeted about this before, like people like I think I've read some Reddit comment where it's like, okay, from now on, Licorice plays carries, Svenskeren plays tanks. Like that's the deal. And my issue with that kind of thinking is just like, who else thought that the exact same way? Immortals in spring 2016, and we all know how that story ended. So I refuse to put this team on the same sort of logic and team strategy that Immortals 2016 had, because that did not end very well for anybody except for Cloud9, because we ended up beating them in the gauntlet. I want them to try to put Licorice in situations where he can try to be well rounded at least. I know he can do it. He has an entire staff of great coaches around him, great players. So in terms of Licorice, that's the only thing that's the only like standout flaw I see, is having just him be a better team fighter and not just try to go in like 1v5 and say, oh shit, like there's no follow up. In terms of just timing, patience, and just tempo, that's just the only thing that Licorice needs to hold up.
I don't even want to say that it's Licorice's fault about a lot of those team fights at the end of this CLG game. Like, this was an agreed upon fight that they wanted to take, and Licorice went in how he was supposed to. It was how the team executed the fight that was more of the problem than Licorice's twisted advance. The Maokai W is then it was more of a team thing. Like, specifically, there's a fight at the opening of the blue side jungle on the wolf side where we set up a death brush. I guess right above a wolf's, and there was only the Maokai and I want to say whoever the jungler was in that brush. And instead we put the Zaya Rise or sorry, the Varus and Rise into the lane, and it was a horribly executed team fight because Maokai went deep, which could have been unideal. It might not have been the best call for a team fight, but I think that was the team fight they were looking for. But Stixxay was pretty strong at that point, so they were able to shred him down on Maokai. And the problem became that they weren't able to kill Cho'Gath as fast as Maokai died. And I think that comes down to the target selection from Sneaky and Jensen. And if you go back and watch the fights, Sneaky is going ham on Cho'Gath, but Jensen is kind of just poking out with his W, not with his W on Rise. He's poking out with his Q, and he's not really doing the necessary damage that you would kind of hope for from a scaling mid laner. And I think that kind of goes to show that Jensen, this split, has been a little underwhelming from a damage aspect. If you look at the Golden Guardians game, then you can obviously say, like, that's a dumb conclusion to come to. And I don't think that it's entirely wrong, but Jensen's been getting the third most goal percentage of any mid laner the split. But he's only doing 3. He's the 7th among mid laners in damage percentage. So I don't think that that's completely the wrong conclusion to come to. And I think that CLG has just completely out team fought us when it came down to it. And our late game rating is not as impressive either. So I don't think it is a Licorice fault. I think it's a team fault, is the conclusion of what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think also our comp just kind of did ourselves in, because there's a point, CLG just had like 2 super tanks versus our 1, and our Maokai didn't even, I think, prioritize itemization that well, because like he was getting blown up really fast, and that shouldn't really happened. So I think it was mostly just an issue of composition as well as just poor fighting and coordination. I think that going into these next 2 weeks, I think they need to stop messing around. Just play focused, play precise. No more 1-1 weeks. Just play smart and play focus, and I think we should be good. That may be a bit difficult because March 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern we play against Optic, and March 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern we play against TSM. And week 8, we only have 2 more weeks left. Optic is 4-10 and has kind of been struggling to find a lot of consistency, especially through their bot lane. They have Elimination as their support, as well as Arrow, who I think is Arrow. Outside of that, I think the first split on Phoenix 1, he's been kind of off and on. And then TSM is at 7-7, looking to get themselves a playoff spot, and has been having issue with their roster really gelling. So I guess let's tackle Optic a bit first. Should this be an easy game for this? I know I said CLG and Golden Gardens should be easy games, but apparently they proved challenging. So what do I know anymore?
Absolutely, we shouldn't sleep on any of these guys or the next 4 teams, because you have, of the teams right now, none of them has limited playoff spots. We have Optic, TSM, and then we close out with Fly and Team Liquid, to my knowledge. But Optic, they're more or less slept on. I think that the main issue is their top side, the fact that Zig's no longer playing and Dokla's very inexperienced. Acadian's been kind of and just kind of going for blinded bait sometimes, and it's not really the greatest. Power of Evil is actually a threat. Actually, I think that despite him being on what's arguably the worst team in the ELCS, I think that Power of Evil has definitely shown that he can stand toe-to-toe with some of the Who's Who mid laners. Is it outstanding? No, but it's still a threat nevertheless. Arrow is, and I would say if they want to put enough pressure, they should put it towards the bottom lane, because if Arrow gets scary enough, he can actually do some work and legitimately carry the entire team on his back. So that's what I want to see prioritization is in that bot lane, because unless they go especially if you go for a late games comp where we can just kind of snowball to some degree and gain early leads on tanks, then our late game should be pretty well. But I do want to, again, I can't emphasize this enough, I want to see them prioritize either the Xayah Rakan lanes or the Tristan or the Tristana as a whole for the bot lane, because those are some of the S tier picks in the bot lane right now and competitive, as opposed to TSM. That should be very interesting. Again, this is a team that can beat Echo Fox and yet can't beat Clutch Gaming ever, or even go 1-1 to FlyQuest. So definitely not a team we should sleep on. And that matchup, pretty even, somewhat even in the top lane. I think Licorice is slightly advantaged. Svenskeren, I think, does have the edge over Mike Young. It's always interesting to see Pobel turn Bjergsen, though Bjergsen hasn't really been close to form as he was. And Sven and Mithy, even Sneaky has admitted, are probably, despite their position, being the most underrated bot lane right now. My only message to Cloud9 is we've secured a playoff spot, so good for you guys. Awesome. We're only one of 3 teams right now. I want that bye week, and if we can control it in our destiny as much as we can, and if we can 2-0 this week and Team Liquid lose a game, then we can essentially cement ourselves a bye week, almost certain. If assuming Clutch Gaming goes 2-0 as well, because that's the only scenario I see. Because if Team Liquid can actually have a good week this week, just keep an eye out on them, then it'll come down to that game in week 9. But if Team Liquid can lose a game this weekend, we can essentially cement ourselves a bye week, and which gives us a top 4.
I will say, I agree with everything you said. I will say, I think if we had to prepare ourselves for one match, I think it would be for TSM, because there is that rivalry, as well as you just have to look good against TSM, because even though they are struggling, they're probably will always be perceived as a threat. I mean, they could be, not even have won a game. They could be like where Golden Guardians is in terms of the standings. I think Cloud9 would still do their due diligence and just practice against them. And I'm hoping to see a more learned, more practiced Cloud9 this week. They've had some more time on this stupid 8.4 patch, so they can prepare a little bit more on their strategies, maybe polish it a bit. I think the meta changes did take everyone by a surprise, not just Cloud9. But and not something to really blame in their struggles last week, I think. But they've had some more time, so I think that they can maybe hone themselves a bit more on how to play in these new changes. And hopefully they do come out with that bye week. I really want to see them get the bye, because the bye is very important.
Yeah, I think the goal has to be the bye week. And anything less, honestly, at this point would be disappointing. Just based on the lead that we kind of had, what was it, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. So maybe this week might not be the best indicator of if we're going to get the bye, because we do play Team Liquid next week, but we do need to win 75% of our games through these next 2 weeks. So if we can do that, then we have a really good chance of getting the bye, and we are in the driver's seat of getting a bye spot. That if we win out, then we automatically get that. And even if we lose one, there is a good chance that we can still get the bye, assuming that we don't drop it to Team Liquid. So the ultimate goal should be a bye week and playoffs. But it's not the end of the world if we don't, because I do believe that we do have a very strong team that is capable of beating anyone in the 3rd through 6th spot. So, but yeah, the goal should be top 2, and this week is a good step in that direction, especially against a strong team like TSM.
I will also say another reason I want to beat TSM, aside from there is that rivalry. I've actually just decided to go through the books in terms of like old records, and with the exception of like the first time we ever won in the LCS, I couldn't find a single time where we 2-0'd them. Like ever since then, like when we first joined and we won on that insane record back in summer 2013, we've either tied or lost 0-2 to TSM, and I think we still own the head-to-head record by like maybe 1 to 2 games. Like it's pretty dead even, despite that. But this would be the first season in a long time where we would 2-0 them in the regular season, and knowing how they're on basically the knife's edge of of a playoff spot, it would be pretty kick-ass if we could 2-0 them.
Nothing would make me happier than beating them and knocking them out of playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. So before we close out, Frozen, I believe you have added this extra slide where you talk a little bit about the Captain Flowers stream that happened last night, I believe.
Yeah, so there's this guy named Nicholas Paul who tweeted at Captain Flowers. I don't know when, but he asked them, how many retweets would it take to get you to cast one of my bronze games? Captain Flowers responded, it was like 1,000 or 10,000 or 5,000 or some shit like that. And Nicholas Paul, the Scion God, went out and got those retweets. So yesterday, for those of you who don't know, we record the podcast Wednesday nights, so it would have been Tuesday. Captain Flowers and Azael casted 5 bronze games, and it was probably the best moment of League of Legends I've seen in a really long time. Maybe my favorite moment since watching Rush play, the Kind Boy play on stream back what, the beginning of season 6,
I think
season
so.
5. Yeah, I don't even know. Like it was just baffling some of the shit that you got to see on stream. Like the names themselves were incredible. Uh, among them, Tide Pod. Tide Pod the was the duo god of Nicholas Paul. We also had the infamous Vi player Andy is a cuck, and we also had the legendary game of shit. The names got redacted on the League of Legends post game thread. So there was shit. I saved it. But Twitch chat itself was one of my favorite things. Or so the other two guys in the last game were Daddy Fat Cock in all caps and Bung My Goose.
Who comes up with these names? Why are they so vulgar?
I don't know, man. But
happens.
Twitch chat fucking love that shit. So I'm hoping some of this pops up in LCS this weekend. We might see some references to the Master Yigas CS1, who's Super Chad, or seeing some of the memes that Twitch chat came up with. But honestly, if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend going back and watching the VOD for these 5 games. I am 80% the way through. I am about a quarter of the way through the 5th game, but I haven't laughed as hard at League of Legends since watching Rush play. So maybe Ray at early Ray streaming. So it is honestly worth wasting 3 or 4 hours of your time. It is a blast.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check out the VOD. It sounds, from what I've heard, it was an extremely fun event. But
no, like this was like more fun than watching any League of Legends I've ever seen in my entire life. And maybe Rush was more fun to watch because like he was so fucking good. But like some of the shit like these bronze players came up with, champion and build wise, like there was a grasp of the undying top lane Jhin E Max, which is his trap, so it's fucking worthless. It's just kind of funny to watch it happen, I guess, and to watch Azale and Captain Flowers like make a case for it on stream. Like it's almost impossible to explain how awesome it was unless you actually watch it. But it is a time commitment, but it's well worth it. Like I think if you want to spend 3 hours in League of Legends, that's not playing it. Like this is like the best way you can do it. If you want to find the VOD for it, go to Twitch, type in Captain Flowers 22 or just Captain Flowers. Find Captain Flowers' Twitch stream. It's Captain Flowers 22. Go to his videos, and it should be the most recent video on there. And Nicholas Paul is a god. There's a couple front page posts about it, and basically the overwhelming consensus is that it was a success and a lot of fun for the community. So raise your COD for the Tide Pod and join along. It is a lot of fun, so check it out. I highly recommend it.
Well, hopefully he'll also be able to do some more of those in the future because it does sound super fun. But I think that's going to be it for us today. Before we close out, gentlemen, give me your predictions on this weekend.
Because we're always optimistic here for our boys, I want that 2-0. I want that bye week, and especially with Academy with Challenger being gone, which they don't have a week off for promotion. That thing is worth its weight in gold at this point because we don't get a week after week 9. We go straight into playoffs. So I want the 2-0s to infinitely more improve our chances in the bye week, and I want a 2-0 TSM.
Yeah, fuck TSM. 2-0. We're gonna curb stop the rest. I'm also perfectly okay going 1-1 this week if it involves the last 2-week pattern of dropping the first game and winning the second game. But I would prefer, and I think that we're gonna go 2-0 this week because it's such a big and important week.
I'll say either 2-0 or 1-1. I think that it all depends on if Cloud9 has their brains on and they are ready to play smart and sharp. If we have a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed Cloud9, I think they will be able to do a lot. But I think if they are a bit lackadaisical like we've seen the past couple of weeks, I think we may end up going 1-1. But we'll just have to see, and you'll definitely hear about it from us. So thank you for listening to this episode of Bodied, the Cloud9 Fancast. Feel free to tweet questions and feedback to @C9Bodied or email us at bodiedfancast@gmail.com. We'll try to get to you whenever you can. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. So, goodbye.
Take it easy. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm done.